Hi there, my name is Sibyl Schaefer. I'm from the University of California, San Diego, and the title of my talk is Facing 1.5 degrees Celsius, Planning Now for an Uncertain Future. In 2015, 196 parties agreed to the Paris Agreement, a legally binding international treaty on climate change. Its overall goal was to keep the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius in order to hold the line, so to speak. More recently, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, indicates that crossing the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold risks unleashing far more severe climate change impacts, including more frequent and severe droughts, heat waves, and rainfall. Every incremental degree of increase intensifies multiple and concurrent hazards. So where are we now? The IPCC has reported that we are at 1.1 degrees Celsius warming above pre-industrial temperatures. Copernicus, the Earth observation component of the European Union Space Program, reports that we have warmed 1.2 degrees. A recent report by the IPCC states that we will likely hit 1.5 degrees Celsius in about a decade, or the early mid-2030s. This prediction has moved forward from 2018, when they predicted 1.5 to happen between 2030 and 2052, but we're now projected to hit 1.5 at the early end of that range. Another recent report from the World Meteorological Organization expects us to exceed the 1.5 measurement in the next 4 years. It's important to note here, and whenever you see temperature numbers, that they are not all calculated the same. The IPCC reports average temperatures over a 30-year period, so they are generally lower and represent a sustained temperature increase. In contrast, this WMO report temperature is averaged over a single year. Additionally, the WMO report was produced in May, before we had one of the hottest summers on record. It is believed that we are currently in an annual 1.5 degree range warming currently. But isn't it getting better? You may be under the impression from positive news reports that the situation is getting better due to the recent advances in green technologies. Unfortunately, green energy has not replaced our production of fossil fuels, which reached new record highs in both oil and coal this past year. Likewise, oil companies are buying up oil and gas assets, betting that demand will continue to rise. Our new-ish Speaker of the House is a pro-oil climate science doubter, suggesting that new climate legislation will continue to be a non-starter in Congress. Carbon capture technology is expensive and under-incentivized. And there is concern that feedback loops, which have the potential to significantly increase warming, are not accurately accounted for in models. Ultimately, global warming is a symptom. The real problem is the overconsumption of Earth's resources driven by capitalism. Even if climate crisis is averted, the current status quo is unsustainable. So what does this have to do with digital preservation? Digital preservation relies on a stable environment. Think of the three-legged stool model, where each leg, organizational, technological, and resources, needs to be present for the stool to be stable. Climate change can affect all of these factors. Weather disasters affect people and the data centers that are responsible for preservation activities. Infrastructure may not be able to handle the increased demand or disruption. Political upheaval, wars, and disasters can all affect the ability to conduct normal business activities. Resources for preservation activities will be significantly reduced as economic growth contracts. And individual and societal priorities may shift to more immediate concerns. So can we wait and see? Not if we want to be able to act while we're still capable of doing so. According to the IPCC, there's a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. And although global heating is devastating, it also only represents one aspect of the escalating and interconnected environmental crises that we're facing, which also includes biodiversity loss, fresh water scarcity, and pandemics. So aside from doing nothing, actions regarding climate change are generally classified into one of two categories: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is an anthropogenic intervention to reduce the sources of greenhouse gases or enhance the sinks of the gases. Adaptation is an adjustment in natural or human systems in response to actual or expected climatic stimuli or their effects. Most of the work in climate change and cultural heritage organizations has been focused on mitigation. And while mitigation is extremely urgent and important, the writing is on the wall that global warming is here and presents very real threats to our ability to preserve materials. We need to start talking about adaptation models and how we prepare our materials for a future in which there may be very little resources available to maintain or preserve them. One of the problems that we're facing is that climate change lies within the realm of deep uncertainty. We don't know probabilities attached to different outcomes or what those outcomes might be, but the point is that whether or not we're uncertain, it should motivate precaution and vigilance, not complacency. So moving forward with vigilance, we need to closely follow information related to developments in climate change, since they may have significant impacts on our capacity to preserve digital materials. And we'll do this so that we can best assess what actions to take to protect materials and when those actions may need to occur. I recently started an NDSA Climate Watch working group that will scan the scientific literature, popular media, and reports from climate sources such as the IPCC, NASA, and the WMO to produce regular annotated bibliographies on these relevant sources, highlighting the areas that most directly affect our ability to preserve. We will also create an ongoing list of the potential risks climate change poses to digital preservation work, and a list of core climate change information resources that can be used to get a solid grounding in the issue, help with future projections, and lobby for preservation resources. Moving forward with precaution, I will also be forming an NDSA climate planning group to delve into this more, but I've listed some of the areas to consider, all of which are based on traditional good preservation practice, but tweaked to address the fragility of our collecting institutions. We need to increase diversification. Diversify the how, the where, and by what means you store your digital materials. Considering different payment plans, like paying 20 years up front for storage as a diversification metric. And as a community, we really need to take seriously the emergent storage mechanisms that can preserve materials without energy expenditure and don't require mining for rare earth elements. When asked what ways you should diversify, the answer really is all of them. Which brings up the question, how can you find enough money to diversify in all of these ways, and isn't it energy intensive? We need to normalize that we can't save everything. We need to be able to conduct deep appraisals of our materials and really ask how they may benefit folks 50 to 100 years from now, who are going to be in the midst of a deeply different climate situation. So, for example, my institution holds the Keeling curve data, which measured levels of CO2 in the atmosphere since 1958, and is one of the first indicators that humans were responsible for increase in carbon in the atmosphere. And that type of data, I think, would be particularly important to maintain over time. Our archival information packages need to be able to be sent and stored in various different types of storage mechanisms and systems and still be understandable. We need to plan For concurrent disaster scenarios, think of an earthquake or a hurricane in which many people may be evacuated to a shared shelter of sorts, a high school gym, etc. Now think of that happening during a pandemic. How do we manage to ensure that our digital materials are safe during times of multiple disasters? Succession planning. This is an area that we've given a lot of lip service to in our profession, but haven't really delved into seriously. There's a lot of questions that we can start to try to answer to provide guidance in this area. Things like, how do you identify a successor? What makes a good successor? What type of agreements need to be in place, etc. And lastly, collaborations. Who preserves what things for general resources? Like who has the designated responsibility and has agreed to preserve software? Who is preserving the WW3 specifications? Who's responsible for these things so that we don't have to individually as institutions also worry about some of the basic infrastructure that our digital materials rely on. Lastly, I want to highlight that ultimately climate change is a social justice issue. Vulnerable communities who have historically contributed the least to current climate change are disproportionately affected. We need to keep this in the forefront of the work that we do. If you're interested in working on an NDSA climate group, please keep an eye out for announcements on the NDSA listserv. I'm expecting to send out a call for participation again sometime over the summer. If you have any questions or are interested in pursuing any of the work that I've mentioned, please do contact me and we'll have a chat. Thank you so much.